Path of Exile 1 is in a bit of turmoil right now. In fact, PoE 2 seems to have taken quite a bit of, let's say, resources, time, and energy away from the team at GGG, and there have been some concerns about what will happen with PoE 1 in the future. Because honestly, I feel like, just my personal opinion, I feel like PoE 2 is a much better game than PoE 1. This is a very hot take, I know, very different from what a lot of the classic PoE 1 players have been saying, but just in putting in under 300 hours in the last few months and being a typical dad gamer in this entire thing, not having completed all of the endgame content, it still feels like a much better experience overall, and honestly, I feel like PoE 2 could have much longer life than PoE 1 did in general. Even though PoE 1 has granted me over thousands of hours of playtime, I feel like PoE 2 is the next evolution in the game. But still, let's hold on to my hot take in just a moment and go from there.
Hey guys, let's talk about PoE 1. Now, when we announced PoE 2, we promised that we would continue to create PoE 1 expansions, and we do intend to keep that promise, but it's certainly been a lot harder to deliver on it than what we expected. Now, the trouble really started after Settlers of Calgar in July last year. The ideal time to have released 326 would have been late October, before the originally scheduled release of PoE 2's early access.
Now that's really interesting because what you have is, honestly in my opinion, Settlers of Calgar being a phenomenal expansion for PoE 1 and really one of the best leagues that I've actually gotten to play in a very, very long time. So even though we haven't had new content in quite some time, stopping on Settlers of Calgar is not a bad place to be. PoE 1 is in a phenomenal state in terms of just gameplay, systems, mechanics, and everything else. And so still being in that league personally is still a good thing because of just how mechanically dense that league was, that mechanic was, and how good of a state that PoE 1 is in at the very moment in time. So yeah, it's not great that we're having to deal with this right now and having to still wait on new content, but I still feel like the cycle for PoE 2 and PoE 1 is still far too close together, and I think the expectations of people are still far too much for a studio of 150 people still trying to do something that most studios like Blizzard still can't even do right to this day. But let's keep going.
But we just didn't think we could do it. It was too close to the huge circus that was the organization around PoE 2's launch. But we also didn't want to immediately launch it right after PoE 2 either, so that kind of ruled out December. So then we're thinking, okay, we can't really have a launch in January due to Christmas, so we're really going to have to do it in February. And this wasn't great. It would mean 7 months with no leagues. But we really didn't think it was possible to do it any earlier than that. And we didn't really announce this exactly, but it was certainly something that we had said to quite a few people over time, so the community became generally aware that that was our plan.
I mean, basically everybody pretty much knew what was going to be happening. PoE 2 is so massive and so big, and honestly had a lot of issues and fires that needed to be put out very quickly, that honestly you had to sit there and take things away from the PoE 1 dev cycle to fix those things in PoE 2. And some of those things still right now are, in fact, band-aids trying to solve the actual problems, like checkpoints and maps, or just the map layout overall, or just endgame content being a little bit too wonky, ES being far too powerful, things like that. There's still balances and issues that need to be corrected. And of course, working on a game that is just brand new being put out and is basically the new baby of the company, while you have the first game still being in a really good state, makes a lot of sense to move those people around and do that thing exactly. But let's continue though.
The issue is this. PoE 2's endgame needed a lot of work. Having the guys on the PoE 1 team help out for 3 months on PoE 2, given that 326 was 7 months away, seemed like a no-brainer, and man did PoE 2 need it. The problem is we got to the middle of October, and PoE 2's launch was imminent, and I'll tell you what, taking people off PoE 2 at that point was just impossible.
Yeah, when you have a game launching as big as PoE 2 directly at that moment in time to try and satiate the other player base for PoE 1, when everybody is hyped about PoE 2 at that exact moment in time, really doesn't do anybody a lot of favors. So they had a deadline to hit. They needed to hit that deadline and put the game out, which made a lot of sense. But at the same time, though, I can feel like a lot of people still don't want PoE 1 to fall off the wayside, which I don't want it to fall off either. I want to switch between Last Epoch, PoE 1, and PoE 2 all year long. I play seasons every other seasons in these games, so it'd be nice to just have that mixture happening consistently.
The endgame was not in a shippable state. But you know what? We could still do it. If the PoE 1 team just kept helping until PoE 2 shipped in late November, we could still do it. Maybe the scope would need to decrease a little bit, but mid-February was still possible. We just needed to ship this damn game first, get it out of the way. We literally couldn't think about anything else until it was done, but we still had time. The problem is, we were fooling ourselves. PoE 2 was delayed 3 weeks, making the problem even worse. And then after the game was released, well, of course we had to immediately deal with all the problems.
And there were a lot of problems, and there still are a lot of problems in PoE 2. Screen clarity is still a massive issue. I'm playing a explosive grenade, gas grenade, grenadier mercenary, witch hunter. So that is, I can't see anything on the screen. And so I get one tap by bosses because I don't see the wind up of the actual boss animation. And then I get tapped when I'm not even realizing it or seeing it in the first place. So yeah, you can say skill issue, but I want to play an ethical build. I don't want to sit there and walk around with a lightning monk or a frost monk and do the exact same thing everybody else is doing. That's kind of boring in my opinion. But the thing is, PoE 2 is so brand new and has so many other concerns that need to be addressed right now. Because if you have a game launch and you don't take care of those issues at that very moment in time, that could literally kill the game directly. Even though PoE 1 doesn't have a new league for 7 months or maybe even longer, it still is in a better state of a game itself than PoE 2 is right now. And I feel like once they've caught up with where they need to be in PoE 2 and they can put PoE 1 with that smaller team to have those leagues being pushed out and have that content still being served, with those balance changes being so not as drastic as what everybody else is looking for, which is really not needed anymore because Melee is kind of sort of been fixed. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's in a much better place than it was before, and everything else looking really good. The tree looks good, endgame looks good, crafting looks good. Then as long as the new league mechanic is good, then people are going to still be playing PoE 1, which is going to be great in those off times. PoE 2 can have that full focus and be moved forward as well.
How could we think about making a PoE 1 expansion? We still have hundreds of thousands of people who are having bad experiences in PoE 2. There are crashes, there are severe in-game balance problems.
Yeah, it's
How
really
could I
bad.
justify taking some of the most experienced developers we have off PoE 2 when it's on fire?
Honestly, he couldn't have said it better himself. PoE 2 is literally a beautiful game that is totally on fire in every sense of the word. I honestly can't see any other way to describe it, because as great as that game is, as great as it feels to play, as good and as chunky all the sounds are and the skills are and the way the classes are designed, there are so many glaring balancing issues that need to be addressed that really it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so there are so many more concerns that have to be fixed with PoE 2 in order to actually have it be in a good state to where they can have those developers move off PoE 2 to back to PoE 1. But they're almost like in a catch-22 of like either you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And I think it's going to be a worse future overall for PoE 2, especially if they just kind of like leave it on the wayside. And you can't sit there and say, well, you're doing a bad job, because they're stuck between two phenomenal games that a lot of people want to play both of and enjoy both at the same time.
Now, after the Christmas break, we had to really admit something to ourselves. The most urgent priority was getting PoE 2 to a point where it didn't have major issues.
True.
And it's hard to even think about what PoE 1 needs when PoE 2 has really obvious problems that need fixing.
True.
We needed to get it to the point of stability and balance, and to fix the most severe deficiencies that PoE 2 has before we can take our eyes off it.
Yes.
So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can't really work on PoE 1 3.26 until PoE 2 0.2.0 has shipped. And then being
So PoE 1 could be on maintenance mode or life support until PoE 2 is actually set at the right spot. And that could take months before it's even set up correctly. So it could be almost a year before we even get a new league inside of PoE 1. I mean, the way the timeline is looking for me, that's what it sort of looks like right now.
honest, we probably need to support that for a couple of weeks after that as well. Now, in the meantime, we are going to get a bunch of pre-production done on 3.26 with whatever people who are not needed to fix issues with PoE 2. And once 0.2.0 is sorted, I promise we will devote as many resources as are needed from our company to get 3.26 done as soon as possible. Unfortunately, I just can't promise a date right now. Now, I'm really sorry for how this went down. Honestly, I should have predicted the fact that taking the PoE 1 team off PoE 1 would lead to this outcome. And I probably should have resisted.
You know, I have to say this directly, and I don't really know another way of putting this. I don't understand why anybody would be upset at GGG ever in their entire life. For one of the lead game designers or the game designer to come out and say, hey, I'm sorry, I made this mistake. Here's where we are right now. Here's what we're going to be doing. Here's the plan. It is almost impossible to be angry at a company like GGG for the way they approach their messaging, for the way they speak to their players with respect, for the way they treat their players with respect. It is impossible, in my opinion, to actually be truthfully, honestly angry at these devs. Oh, you're glazing. No, I've seen so many other devs treat their customers like garbage throughout the entire lifespan of me being a gamer for this 42 years, that it's honestly very refreshing to see this, especially if you look at something like what Blizzard has done to what GGG does and how they approach things specifically. So yeah, this is not going to be the best situation right now, but it was honestly expected. If you thought PoE 2 was going to be a smooth launch, really easy to go through and have a bunch of content ready to go, I don't know what kind of planet you were living on, because that's really, you're launching a brand new game that has to live up to the hype and also the complexity and also all the systems of PoE 1 as well in its sequel that everybody's been looking forward to. So relax if you feel any other way.
Doing it. But at every stage, I just kept thinking, we still have time. And then we didn't have time anymore. Now, we still have a lot to learn about how to run 2 games simultaneously. We were overconfident. We still need to work out how to structure our studio to make this possible.
Yeah, they're gonna have
but we do have a solid plan for what we want to do with 326. Obviously, I can't talk about it yet, but I'm hoping you guys are going to love it. I really want to thank you guys for all your support over the years. Hopefully you guys do deserve better than this, and we will get 326 out as fast as we can.
So we don't have a timeline on 326. We don't. And it's basically just set to whenever it's actually launched. And here's going to be my hot take on the entire thing with Path of Exile just in general and their league system. I feel like Grinding Gear Games is under basically just a huge amount of stress continuously, not from the main group of core players that play PoE 1 or PoE 2, but I also feel like a lot of the pressure is placed upon them from content creators and streamers. Hear me out. How many times have you seen PoE content creators or even ARPG content creators basically just complete the campaign in a few hours, get to end game, and basically be done with the game within about a week or so, and then say that they're bored, there's nothing else to do, they don't know what else to play, and then they're done with it trying to just create other barriers eventually for themselves to even just create more content? PoE 1 and PoE 2 is unfortunately, in my opinion, ruled by the 0.1% of actual players in that game. Because everybody else who's a normal human being is not able to clear the campaign within the first 4 hours. Again, I have 2 YouTube channels. I'm also a dad. I also have a regular job. It's hard for me to get to the campaign within about a week of PoE 1, then actually get into the endgame content and be almost endgame boss ready by about month 1. If that, I only spend playing all my time playing that PoE 1 league, then it's the only thing I'll be able to play is to do it by that end. If I were to space it out between trying to get everything done or having whatever time I have to have other content or other things in between, then I could probably get to endgame bossing and probably Ubers maybe within the 3-month mark, but it's so rare and hard in between that it's honestly quite concerning. Yes, there are streamers that are bored with the game. They don't know what to do. Look, I understand GGG really relies on those streamers specifically for content creation. And unfortunately, there are a lot of players who take those opinions directly from streamers without formulating their own thought process and then just parrot whatever their favorite streamer says to whatever they feel the game should be doing, even though they're not in the same realm, ballpark, or even just percentile of that actual content. Here's the thing. I think leagues should be 5 to 6 months in between. This gives us the ability to have enough content for PoE 2, PoE 1, and also other games in between like Last Epoch or even Project Diablo 2 to play as well to mix things up. I don't have the ability or the time to constantly play only one game in one league. I don't stream 8 to 12 hours a day. I don't min-max my builds. I don't look after a build guide. I do everything basically myself. I do everything SSF, and I don't trade because I feel like that is the true way of like playing the game. So seeing it from that perspective, I can see why a streamer who plays 12 hours a day is constantly min-maxing, has a plan, has a routine, plays leagues in order to try and get to the end game as quickly as possible to complete the league, would be bored with that content that's right there. However, though, I feel like if GGG focuses on that group specifically, they're going to be doing themselves a disservice because the content being produced is going to be far too great for what that team can actually do. And then on top of that, it could lead to far more mistakes as well. I want to make sure that both games have enough content for all kinds of players, and at least having that 5 to 6 month gap in between gives people who are in fact not able to play as long as they can or as much as they can try to get to that end game area to where they feel that they've accomplished something for the next league and the other game to play as well, or switch in between or play Last Epoch if they ever release another season, or Project Diablo 2 or even Diablo 2 Resurrected if that ever just comes back. So it's honestly kind of crazy to expect people to have that same exact mentality that a streamer who dedicates all of their time to that one specific game does. but I can see the fact that if GGG wants to have that kind of mentality, it's honestly going to push someone like myself away from playing every single season, or I'll move to every other season playing it because I won't have the ability or the time to even get to the content that I want to see with that specific build or character during that time frame. Again, I feel like a 5 to 6 month gap in between seasons would be the best course of action for GGG right now to basically just set themselves up for success with having the current team size. They would honestly have to balloon in size to try and recover and put out that content of what they want to do at the pace people are crying about, even though, like I said before, it's not even their true opinion of why they're even crying. It's just them copying a streamer to then say that so they can have a voice. Sorry to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. But you know what? Let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. What is your strategy, or what do you think GGG should in fact do to try and get content out faster? Do you feel like they should in fact delay even more so that way they have a good time lapse in between seasons for both games? Or do you feel like they should do something else and do every 3 months still for both titles, which I feel like would be honestly a little bit crazy. With all that being said though, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you next time.